Okay, this one, guys, if you are a person who loves peace, this will probably be a really good one for you. And if you're one that likes to maybe confront, this will be a good one for you.
A good lesson.
So, we got Solomon, who he's now taken over the throne because David died. That's recorded in 1 Kings 2:10 through 12. And, like any transition of rule, there's some loose ends that need to be tied up from the past administration, or if you're like this current non-president, you destroy everything from the last administration. So here in Kings, we have Solomon, and we've got some leftovers. Now, personally, I like leftovers. I like leftover spaghetti. I like leftover, whatever. But when it comes to rule, sometimes the leftovers can be a benefit to the new administration. Sometimes they're actually a hindrance. So, for example, one of the common things is when a leader hands over something to another leader, if the first leader does not withdraw or drastically minimize their role, then the people will stay loyal to that leader. So that's like an example of that is John the Baptist. Excuse me. He's got his group of people, and they're like, hey, look, Jesus, they're baptizing people, which, by the way, Jesus never baptized anyone with water. His disciples did that work. But John's like, that's fine. In fact, he has to increase, I must decrease. And so some of his followers actually left him at that point, and they went over to the Lord. And whenever I led the greeters at an old church, when I knew it was time for me to transition out, I selected another leader, and I actually got completely out of greeting, which I kind of wanted to stay in, but just not as a leader. But I knew that I needed to completely get out. And that's even more important for people with very strong leadership personality roles. One of the most important lessons I learned is when you're sitting around people, ask them what all they're doing with God and what all He's showing them, and just be quiet. Challenge people to start off something, and you just be quiet. Because when you're a perceived leader, which everybody is, so I use that term perceived leader because, again, we're all ministers, people will default to the strongest leader. And so for those that like to follow, it's really important for you to share and to step up, because it's like hiding treasure from everybody else. Everybody has great things to share, and so it's important to be a voice. So I want to give you the definition of a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. This is one of the most revelatory things I got as far as that years ago. I don't know if I read it, if I heard it, or if the Holy Spirit gave it to me. I have no idea where it came from. But a peacekeeper is one who will keep the peace at all costs. Yeah. So they hate conflict. They will stay away from conflict. Eventually they'll explode, though. That's the problem. So then it's dealt with, but not dealt with, properly. And it also enables bad behavior in others, and can even put some people in danger. If you have an abusive situation, usually you see a peacekeeper married to someone that's not, and they can end up in some terrible situations. So that's why in the Beatitudes, it's not in your notes, but let's just look at that really quick. Sorry, guys, weeds and stuff, I tell you. Okay, so in Matthew 5:9, I'm reading out of the English Standard Version, it said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." So a sign of maturity is the willingness to confront in order to make peace. So peacemakers have brave communication. Peacemakers are wise. There's some things you don't need to say anything. You know what I mean? It's not that you're trying to keep the peace at all costs. It's just dumb. It won't matter. or it's recognizing that people are at varying levels, okay? But a peacemaker operates in agape because agape is willing to, again, make a mess and confront in order to have true peace. The most prime example of that is the Lord, who was willing to have his flesh ripped off of him and be on a cross, absolutely naked, nothing on him whatsoever, irrecognizable, so that we could have true peace. And so that's what peacemakers are about. So again, the phrase, they will be called sons of God. That word sons is the one that refers to mature sons and daughters. So being a peacekeeper is a sign of immaturity. And I've had a lot of experiences, like where I've had to drive, 8 hours to someone to say, hey, you're getting into legalism. I've had to have difficult phone conversations like, hey, if you don't quit griping about living here, you're never going to move. I mean, there's so many, hey, you can't, as a 20-something be sleeping with a 15-year-old. That's just not good, and you should probably go to jail. I mean, there's just so many, things that I've had to have conversations about. But the other side of it is there's been plenty of times I've wanted to say, hey, quit being stupid. And the Holy Spirit's like, hey, that's just a personal offense to you. You just need to be quiet. Okay? So that's how that works. Ego will show itself when you're not like, I'm not going to let people treat me like that, or I'm not going to blah, 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 and you get all bowed up, right? There's definitely the idea of don't allow yourself to be a doormat, but whenever you're, it's this personal thing, I'm not going to allow people to treat me this way, now you're in pride. Now it's ego. The other attitude is, I'm a child of God, therefore I'm going to set healthy boundaries. I'm going to address this bad behavior. If this person doesn't change how they treat me, then I'm going to adjust the relationship accordingly.
You think that when we were talking Friday about that countenance, that's part of that peace, that inner peace that's visible, basically?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, with that being said, a peacemaker is willing to embrace conflict in order to pursue true peace. So for the S personalities in here, y'all will tend more toward the peacekeeper versus peacemaker. For the D personalities, we tend toward more wanting to pick a fight at the slightest provocation, and we actually enjoy stirring up things a little bit. So I'm sure you can see how both sides there. Like, I forgot to tell Mike, the guy from North Carolina that I visited with as far as launching an ecclesia there, he took our course. He said, I have an idea that you're an acquired taste. that's a D. We're acquired taste. Some people spit us out. Kind of like babies eating, spinach or all. Yeah, no, I don't think so. And sometimes it's deserved, because I often apologize for D's, because we can be really, just jerks. Okay, so now with that context, we have Solomon establishing his rule. Solomon was called to live in peace, to build the house of God in peace. He was going to rule in peace, all of those things. So peace was a very important word for him. Yet, let's look at how he dealt with some of those leftovers from David's former administration. So we're going to start in 1 Kings 2:13, and we're in the English Standard. What did we decide we were going to call him? Adonijah? Adon. Okay, Adonijah, for those that are just tuning in, Adon from now on. Then Adon, the son of Haggith, I guess. There's weird names here. Came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. And she said, do you come peacefully? He said, peacefully. Then he said, I have something to say to you. And she said, speak. He said, you know that the kingdom was mine, and all that, and that all Israel fully expected me to reign. However, the kingdom has turned about and become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. Okay, is it yours or not? You know what I mean? Like, can y'all see his duplicity immediately? We all know I should be the true king. Okay, we all know that. But it appears that Solomon's now king, and it was from the Lord. Now, this is important for peacekeepers because when people come to you in agreement, sometimes a peacekeeper will let their guard down and not hear the rest of what is being said or watch the body language. Let me give you an example. And I'm going to interrupt myself a lot because I want to give you guys nuggets, and they're probably not in your notes. Recently dealt with a lady who her husband is a narcissist and a psychopath, and I think probably a very real danger if not for the protection of the Holy Spirit. And he wanted a divorce. So when it finally came out, he was giddy. Okay? And I was all, because he was giddy, and yet what he would say is, if I didn't make all these mistakes or blah, blah, we wouldn't even need a divorce, but with a divorce we can start over, it's all my fault, blah, blah. He'd cry, if I could reverse things, if we could, I would in a heartbeat. But his behavior and the fact that he was still going through with the divorce didn't match what he was saying. And she was very confused because she's a peacekeeper. And so he would say these things and then she'd feel sorry for him. And I said, why are you feeling sorry for him? He was giddy in announcing the divorce. And if he truly didn't want it, he could stop it at any minute because he knows you would take him back. And she's like, oh, so what happened? Her initial observance of him actually being happy to say, right, I want a divorce. And then later his fake caring for her when she's on the side of the road with the flat tire right after he said that confused her. And so his demonstration of kindness, okay, it made her dismiss the giddiness. So it took someone to come alongside her and say, that's not real. And sure enough, he was already dating someone else. Okay, so that's very important where we have him, we know the kingdom belonged to me, but it appears it's my brothers, from the Lord. So it worked because he goes on, and now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me. She said to him, speak. He said, please ask King Solomon, he will not refuse you, to give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife. Bathsheba said, very well, I will speak for you to the king. Now here's what's going on. If he would have gotten Abishag as his wife, he would have been king. Because one of the takeovers back in the day was you would take their wife. So remember when Absalom crowned himself as king? What did he do? He slept with the concubines of David on the rooftop in front of all of Israel. So that was a hostile takeover. But Bathsheba didn't recognize what was going on. Now, one reason she may not have recognized what was going on is because Abishag and David never consummated any marriage. But still, the implication was there, and Adon was trying to get in through that, and maybe it was enough to get him crowned. Okay? So, here he's, acting like he recognizes Solomon as king. He's asking for Abishag. She's like, okay, I'll go ahead and do that. Verse 19. So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him on behalf of Adon, and the king rose to meet her and bowed down to her. Then he sat on his throne. He had a seat brought for the king's mother, and she sat on his right. Then she said, I have one small request to make of you. Do not refuse me. And the king said to her, make your request, my mother, for I will not refuse you. She said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adon, your brother, as his wife. King Solomon answered his mother and said, why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adon? Ask for him the kingdom also, for he is my older brother, and on his side are Abiathar the priest and Joab the son of Zeruiah. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, saying, God do so to me and more also, if this word does not cost Adon his life. Now therefore, as the Lord lives, who has established me and placed me on the throne of David my father, and who has made me a house, as he promised, Adon shall be put to death today. So King Solomon sent Benaiah and struck him down, and he died. This is so crucial because Solomon recognized his role as a peacemaker. And now you may think, well, that's probably pretty normal, back then with the thrones and stuff. I don't think for his personality style it was necessarily normal for him to just start killing people. If he was a D, possibly. But I think he was more than likely a CS personality, or at least a CD. And so he obviously recognized a threat to the work of God. Because he said, I swear by the Lord. This wasn't any personal affront. He recognized the manipulation. His mother had no idea. And he saw this is a threat to the purpose of God and the word of the Lord. So, got a situation with a group of people. A new guy has been coming a few times to their meeting. And everybody, they're getting, something's wrong. Something's wrong with this guy. And so I'm watching their conversation, just seeing what is developing. And even a person who doesn't yet know the Lord is saying he's creepy. Something's wrong with this guy. Third visit, he wants to lead the meeting. So I instantly thought of that Elijah dude.
Right.
And so the evangelist of the group is like, guys, we need to love, we need to give them a chance, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, actually, love is not allowing a wolf to come into your meeting and destroy it. Now, whether he's a wolf or not, I don't know. He could be a baby that's not yet, taught and discipled, or maybe he is a wolf. I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing, that Elijah dude split up and destroyed the group over in Portales because people were like, well, we need to show love.
Right.
Love is not allowing a wolf into the sheepfold to kill him. That's not love at all. So whatever, and in fact, with this particular group, I had warned them, the enemy will send in people. And again, I don't know if that's this guy, but I did say you need to heed the warnings of what everybody's feeling because something's up. And there is no way I would give him a platform. So anyway, it's a very interesting situation. And I encourage them to ask him about his born again experience. And that way they know for sure if he's born again. And who is Jesus to you? Because built on the foundation, he's the Christ, is the ecclesia, right? So if you can't say he's the Christ or he's God in the flesh, you're not born again. And then you approach him from a different manner. Okay? So, here he goes. He has to kill him. All right.
I was going to say, this cycle, the same scenario, I'll put it that way. If you're a history buff and you go back in England, and it was so-and-so had this mistress, and so therefore they have a claim on the leadership, and we've got to kill them, and there's all that mix and blend and
bloodlines.
And it was any little small thing that usually the guys behind the person could take power, and that's what this basically is.
Well, and if you look at all the wives and concubines that Solomon had, it was all about power and treaties, and it got him in trouble. Yeah, very good. Okay, now we're going to look at Abiathar, however you say it. The priest. I was checking to make sure that Dorina wasn't going to get the pronouncing on her phone, and then like last week, Okay, so and to Abiathar the priest, the king said, "Go to Anathoth to your estate, because you deserve death. But I will not at this time put you to death, because you carried the ark of the Lord God before David my father, and because you shared in all of my father's affliction." So Solomon expelled him from being priest to the Lord, thus fulfilling the word of the Lord that he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. Guess who was supposed to fulfill the word of the Lord? Saul. And so here we've got Solomon ending that. Okay, so, this priest, when he came to David, he was one of the first and the strongest supporters of David. And he is actually one of the rare survivors that was able to get out of the city of Nob when Saul had all the priests and their wives and children, I think even animals maybe, killed there for supporting David, which, by the way, was gossip from Doeg the Edomite, so he was half Jew, half from the descendant of Esau. Abiathar was a descendant of Eli. He possessed the ephod, which contained the Urim and, Thummim. This enabled him to seek God's will for David during crises. He served alongside Zadok, who was not of the line of Eli, and he served David well until Adon. Even during Absalom's rebellion, he supported David. And so this is where I think he agreed that Adon was the rightful heir to the throne. I think that's why. And maybe he was religious, and he didn't like the idea of Solomon, who was the son of Bathsheba, being king. We don't know for sure, but we do know that he actually did know God chose Solomon. He knew it. And instead of supporting the word of the Lord, he went with Adon, and for that he was expelled. Zadok chose faith in God's choice. Abiathar chose human reasoning. So for that, he was deposed and banished to his estate. Then we have Joab. Joab is a very interesting character. I want to study him just to get in this guy's head. He's like an enigma to me. He was extremely loyal to David, yet he wasn't. He was concerned about how David ruled, and then he wasn't. I mean, he's a very interesting. I think he's probably an opportunist. Opportunist is what he was. But in verse 28, it says, when the news came to Joab, for Joab had supported Adon, although he had not supported Absalom, Joab fled to the tent of the Lord. He caught hold of the horns of the altar. And when it was, when it was told King Solomon, Joab has fled to the tent of the Lord, behold, he is beside the altar, Solomon sent Benaiah, saying, go strike him down. So Benaiah came to the tent of the Lord, said to him, the king commands, come out. And he said, no, I will die here. And he's like, okay. No, just kidding. So Benaiah, he went back to the king, told him he won't move, saying, Joab has said, thus said Joab, and thus he answered me. The king said, do as he has said. Strike him down, bury him, and thus take away from me and from my father's house the guilt for the blood that Joab shed without cause. The Lord will bring back his bloody deeds on his own head, because without the knowledge of my father David, he attacked and killed with the sword 2 men more righteous and better than himself, Abner, the son of Ner, commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa, the son of Jethro, commander of the army of Judah. So shall their blood come back on the head of Joab and on the head of his descendants forever. But for David, and for his descendants, and for his house, and for his throne, there shall be peace from the Lord forevermore. So Benaiah, the son of whoever, went up and struck him down and put him to death, and he was buried in his own house in the wilderness. The king put Benaiah over the army in place of Joab, and he put Zadok, the priest, in place of Abiathar. Now, that was unprecedented. If I'm not mistaken, I think any time you went into the house and you grabbed the horns, that was like an immunity. Kind of like if people flee today and they go into like a Catholic church or whatever, we had laws of sanctuary where law enforcement could not go into a church and get someone out. It was considered, sacred and set apart. Nowadays, they shut down churches. But that was the process. So the fact that Solomon's like, kill him anyway, is very interesting. But did y'all see the irony? Did anybody see the irony in that whole situation?
He basically said, just do whatever he said.
I know, but the irony of here you have Solomon, the son of the wife of David, that David stole from one of his mighty men, that David had Joab kill, is now executing justice for him shedding innocent blood. Now, when I read that, I'm like, you know what? That just, that sounds a little unjust. And so I had to have that question answered. And Joab was actually David's nephew. And I think that's probably why he was more lenient with him, like everybody else, is because it was his nephew. He was one of the most brave and skilled of his warriors. I mean, he served him well in that respect. He suppressed rebellions, won many king battles for David. He recognized that Absalom was going to be a problem, and so he handled it himself. But it appears that the reference that Solomon's referring to, Joab killed Abner in revenge for Abner killing Joab's brother, despite Abner's new loyalty to David. Not to mention Abner tried to get Joab's brother to stop pursuing him and later killing his own cousin Amasa. So there was like this family feud going on, but still it doesn't, the irony. And so I was like, okay, Lord, explain this to me, because I'm a little bit irritated. When I read it, I was a little bit irritated. I'm like, that's not justice. I don't like that. And he said, well, first of all, David repented. Therefore, that sin no longer had any place. So justice was already taken care of. There was nothing to judge. So to say that it's an irony that Solomon is going after the guy that killed Uriah is looking at it from a point of as if the sin was still there. So because David repented, that was no longer there. Therefore, it was not unjust. The other thing that was very important, he told me, is that the vengeance on the enemy, that it was the son of Bathsheba executing justice and righteousness. That the fact that it was Solomon executing this justice was a slap in the face to the enemy's plans of David and Bathsheba and them being destroyed. The only thing that kept David from being deposed was because he repented. That was the only thing. And so anyway, it was kind of like if you go through a trial, if you come out, you come out of it on the other side, and you've learned lessons, and your faith is strong, and now you help others with the same thing. That's what this is. So it was vengeance on the enemy. So after that, I was like, okay. Now, I also found out that it was actually in the law of Moses that you can go into the altar and be taken care of. However, because Joab was a murderer, he could not claim that right. Yeah. So the law wasn't broken. Yeah, I thought that was interesting too. Okay, the final one that he's going to have to deal with is, let's just call him Shimmy. And unless you have a better nickname, Richard.
No, Shimmy was a real character.
Shimmy of the Sham. Shimmy. Okay. So in verse 36, then the king sent and summoned Shimmy and said to him, build yourself a house in Jerusalem and dwell there, and do not go out from there to any place whatever. For on the day you go out and cross the brook Kidron. Now remember, these are people that sided with Adon. Okay, so he's having to deal with them. Know for certain that you shall die, and your blood will be on your own head. And Shimei said to the king, what you say is good. As my lord the king has said, so will your servant do. So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. But it happened, at the end of 3 years, that 2 of Shimei's servants ran away to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath. And when it was told Shimei, behold, your servants are in Gath, Shimei arose and saddled a donkey. He went to Gath to seek his servants. Shimei went and brought his servants from Gath. And when Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and returned, the king sent and summoned Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and solemnly warn you, saying, know for certain that on the day you go out and go to any place whatever, you'll die. And you said to me, what you say is good, I will obey. Why have you not kept your oath to the Lord? Notice that. And the commandment with which I commanded you. The king also said to Shimei, you know in your own heart all the harm you did to David my father. So the Lord will bring back your harm on your own head. But King Solomon, now he shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. So the king commanded Benaiah, and he went out, struck him dead, and he died. So the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. Now I don't know if y'all caught this, but in every instance, he is speaking his prophecy.
Yeah.
Isn't that neat? Every instance. What does that tell us? His driving force was his word. The greatest example to me, even surpassing Moses, of someone being driven and every single decision being filtered through the word is Solomon. But with that also came a greater responsibility to obey the Lord, right? And to have identity. Because he did not have those two things very, very clearly set in cement, he also did not live up to the level of revelation that he had. And because he did not live up to the revelation that he possessed, he then fell, and the kingdom was divided after his death. In America, especially, maybe the Western church, there's revelation at our fingertips. I mean, we can get our phone and just put in whatever we want to know, and we can read things. And how much are we consuming? Like, you know how when you sit down and you eat chips, before you know it, the whole bag's gone? And the only evidence that you ate the whole bag is all the crumbs in your lap and on your shirt. That's kind of how we are in this culture, is we will just consume doctrine. Consume. You got to know that whatever you consume, there is a responsibility that comes with that. And so for him, he had such revelation, and yet he did not walk in it or have the integrity that was needed to walk in it. And of course he fell. So I find it interesting. He always went back to his call. So here's the thing. First of all, there's a lot of human reasoning here. Adon humanly reasoned he was the next king. The priest humanly reasoned that he was the next king. Shimei humanly reasoned that surely Solomon would give him some leniency so he could go get his servants back.
And Bathsheba.
Yeah.
When she went to Solomon.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously, if you have two servants that ran away, you got to go get them back. He probably thought there would be some, provision for that. No. And see, here's the thing. Solomon always brought back what the agreement was. Like any good parent, see, he had to establish his rule. I do what I say. If I tell you, blah, 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 and you don't do it, I will do what I told you. It was so refreshing when President Trump became president. If he warned someone, like Afghanistan, ISIS, you do this and this, the red line, it was very plain. What did he do? Drop the biggest bomb we have that came out of cannon on ISIS. Killed 100 in a day or something? I mean, it was amazing. He kept his word. Peacemakers keep their word, even to their own hurt. Does that make sense? Here's the thing. Peacekeepers will lie to avoid conflict.
I just think it's interesting that each one of his basically enemies, it was their own word that condemned them. It wasn't his pronouncement. It was like you said, the agreement.
Yeah.
But it was their word, and I think we're going to see that. If we're not seeing that now, that the enemy and these people that come up and say this ought to happen, this ought to happen, this ought to happen.
Yeah.
And I think it will, but it's going to come back and as a judgment on themselves.
I agree. Their own words will
Yes.
will condemn them. Well, I mean, I think it's Matthew, doesn't it, that you'll be judged by every idle or useless word.
Yeah.
Whatever word does not add to the life of a person or yourself or in general, you'll be judged for it.